You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and it's time for another steamy spotlight interview with an author. Today's guest is USA Today bestselling author Kwana Jackson, who also writes as KM Jackson. Her latest book, How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days, is sadly not so much a guide for how to wed the Hollywood heartthrob, but rather a friends to lovers road trip romance. Please join me in welcoming author of How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days, KM Jackson.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here. Oh, isn't it sad that it's not a guide? I'm sorry to everybody who thought it was. If I knew that trick, wouldn't I be maybe married to him? I'm sorry to my husband, but he knows.
I think just the title alone, though, is sure to sell a ton of copies, because if there is a guide any of us want, it is a guide to figuring out how to marry the delightful Keanu Reeves.
We all want that. We all want that. And it's so kind of strange that the title really just came to me from a tweet. It really did. It just is one of those things. If I see it and I'm procrastinating, which I'm usually procrastinating by, being on some sort of social media. If I'm not watching Netflix, I'm on Twitter.
Oh, sure.
And people who know me know I have been for a long time. But I saw a tweet one day about Keanu and about the next Matrix coming out and the next John Wick coming out. And they were supposed to come out on the same day, but the pandemic turned everything upside down. And when I saw this, if it's in my head, it usually comes out of my Twitter fingers, unfortunately. I try to rein myself in, and I'm usually good at that, but usually it just comes like right out my head, through my fingers. And that's what happened that day. When I saw that tweet, I said, note to self, don't put out your next book on Keanu Day unless it's that How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days rom-com. And I hit send. That's exactly how the book was born and how the title came out. It's like people ask me all the time. They're like, why Keanu? Why this? Why that? I'm like, it's no bigger than the fact that I saw that tweet and it had to be Keanu because that was the tweet. That was the title. It's like,
I mean, first of all, let's be honest. I feel like the inspiration behind most great ideas these days starts on Twitter or TikTok. But
seriously.
Secondly, Keanu Reeves is a national treasure who is probably also the last great man on earth. So
it feels that way. I not kicking it to my husband, poor thing. He gets knocked down a lot on social media, and no fault of his.
No, he's just not 30, Keanu. Like, that's it.
Married over 30 years, which is ridiculous.
That's amazing.
But he does get little kicks. Like last night, we were talking about the very unfortunate news of the big breaking news, social media news of Lisa and Jason.
It's on my list of things to chat with you about. It is here in my notes.
And it's a huge thing, and it comes up in my book. I didn't know of that news. And I yell it down to my husband because I was like, gasp, and having a fit of my own up in my office. And I yelled down to my husband. I was like, Lisa and Jason have broken up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm yelling, and he's like, oh no. And God bless him. Oh no. You know, where normally he wouldn't have been, oh no, but he actually hasn't read all my books, but he's read this book and he enjoyed this book. So he said, oh no, in just the right way, which he would not usually give that answer. And I said, right. And he goes, see, you should have wrote about us. We're still, hanging in there or something like that. And there's this long pause from me. And I'm like, no, just no. Like,
oh my gosh.
Like, dude, what, really? Like, that's never going to happen.
I love, though, that he's up to date enough and he has read the book to understand who these people are and the significance of this this breakup in the world today.
Yes, he has, and sure he's still at work, but I'm sure he gets me enough to know that this is serious for me and a big deal.
Yes. No, and I did want to bring it up because, first of all, as we're recording this, it is January, and this breakup is hot
breaking news
right now.
This
yes,
breakup
it is
breaking news.
Breakup news. And
breaking breakup news, which should be no business of probably any of ours.
But this is the world we live in.
But this is the world we live in, especially the world we live in the little bubbles we live in now,
Yes.
being, isolated and sort of fixated on news and social media and things like that. I'm like, I have no business feeling the way I feel. It's like, mind your business, girl. And no business and probably no right to feel the way I feel. It's like, get a life and distance yourself a little bit. I do have that much perspective to understand that. But it's like, still we feel how we feel how we feel. And I think that is a real, sorry for them, a real sort of consequence of celebrity.
It's true.
And this world that we are in,
yeah.
which I guess is a little bit of what I'm exploring in the book, the sort of consequence of celebrity and how much it becomes a part of life.
Yeah. And like how this ties into our conversation about your book also is just the idea that, in How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days, we have somebody who
if you want to shorten it, feel free. I know it's the longest title in the world. It's so long. I'm like Keanu 90 or How to Marry Keanu. I'm like
How to Marry Keanu. But I love that, at the core of it, we have this friendship story. We have somebody who basically has explored their grief by tying themselves to happy memories of watching Keanu movies. And that's sort of what we've done in the pandemic. I mean, I think we've done that before the pandemic for sure. But I think the connection has become a lot more emotional during the pandemic as opposed to just, oh, he's hot. Ooh, I love them. Oh my God, I'd love to be the ham in that Lisa Bonet and Jason Momoa sandwich. But like now, facts, right? Yeah. But also there's a lot more emotion tied to it because we tie our emotions to like core memories and like trauma and love and like things that are just really resonate with you over time. And so I love that this book came out during the pandemic. Like, I know that's weird to say, but it's like, it does make sense to me. And I think it will resonate with a lot of people because of the time and the shared experience we all have because of this time.
Thanks so much. Thank you. That makes me feel very good. And that's what I really hope. That is a big thing that I was hoping to get across.
Yeah.
With the book. I know it's got a very sensationalized title. I couldn't help the title. That's what came to me. It's got a very sensationalized title, but I was hoping with the story as I was writing it to really bring that feeling across of with celebrities and her fixation on Keanu. He was more of a representation of her getting over this grief, just like you said, her having that good memory and using that to heal. He was really her healing space, her space to just get through and be able to really just walk through her every day. He sort of made it possible for her to just sort of get through her every day. And sometimes it takes a long time. People don't grieve the way others grieve. Everyone grieves differently. Yes. Everyone does their normal day-to-day by having other things to hold on to. You have your other sort of normal routines. And it's all about sort of the mask we wear that, you look perfect in some ways, but maybe you go home and do something different, and that's what I was trying to, get at, and for me during the pandemic, I watched tons of, I did write this book at the beginning of lockdown and the pandemic. So, it wasn't the worst research homework to have to watch tons of Keanu movies. And for a lot of them, it was me watching them again because I am a Keanu fan. My mother is a Keanu super fan. But some of them were new to me, but most of them I had seen already. So it was a joy to rewatch a lot of my favorites and things like that.
Yeah. And watch them with like a fresh light and everything too.
A fresh light and a fresh eye and things like that. And, you know, I know Keanu has gotten a lot of sort of a lot of ribbing for, you know, his acting and things like that. But in a lot of ways, he brings a lot of joy. But in a lot of ways, I'm like, wow, he's really got a lot of depth and a lot of range. And he's very funny. You know, I learned a lot while watching so many Keanu movies. I was like, this was fun. And, you know, so I got a kick out of that. But I also saw for myself, where I'm a big fangirl in a lot of different things, I was binging so many K-dramas during the pandemic, just because I was going through a lot of my own fear and grief, just like the rest of the world, of uncertainty. What do? We're staying inside. We're worried about our family. We're doing things like that. I couldn't do my normal, you know, I had my deadlines and I had my writing. And I know a lot of writers were going through a lot of their own ways to figure out how to cope, how to do. But I couldn't do my normal reading. I found I felt I couldn't focus. I couldn't get myself to focus in the ways that I would normally focus. So I'm like, I can't even read the way I normally read. Because
and you were not alone in that.
Read? You know, it's like, you know, you're picking up, you're like, did I just read that? What did I just read? I don't understand what I just did. So I would just be binge watching my K-dramas, which I already love, but I would just binge watch or stay up all night. And, you know, I had to talk to my doctor. I'm like, I can't sleep. You know, we're all going through these different cycles. So the book sort of turned into this, you know, journey of how do we deal with our fears and things like that. And I gave a lot of that to Lou with her going through her own grief and trauma and things.
I think it's a great way to process your own. I mean, it's a great way to process your own grief and trauma. I don't think a lot of people think about the fact that we are living in like a traumatic time period right now.
Very much so.
We are all experiencing trauma, whether or not it feels traumatic to you individually. We are living in a traumatic way right now. This is just the facts of life right now. So how that manifests itself is different for different people, like you said. But for you, it manifested a book about a woman in love with Keanu Reeves.
A woman in love with Keanu Reeves. In love with Keanu and the idea of Keanu, but also in love with her best friend.
Yes.
Though she would deny it. I've heard some critics say that how could she not know and things like that. I think she and her best friend always knew they were in love, but they just had their own obstacles and things to get over. True had his own grieving process to go through.
Exactly.
And,
no, there is a time. There's also finding the right timing. Like, if I know this person is there for me no matter what, like it's like they're almost on the back burner. Like I know that they're there for me. I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, we are going so deep so quickly. But one thing before we dive into,
sorry about that.
No. This is wonderful. Sometimes I love when I can like write out notes for a podcast episode and then just like throw them in the trash because like we just keep going and it takes like a whole new direction, and I am perfectly okay with it. But I have to know from your deep binge watch of the Keanu movies, do you have an all-time favorite?
Goodness, it always changes with every person I talk to. I don't have an all-time favorite. I do have a top list though, like a top 3 or 4 list. One of my super all-time favorites that I will always stop to watch is A Walk in the Clouds. And I just adore this. Like it just always comes to me when I think of Keanu. I just love. It's a very different thing. Everyone always says
side of him.
It's such a different side of him. I just think he is just the sweetest. Like I melt whenever I think of this movie. I adore the scene when they're like fanning the flames, and I'm just you can't see this if you're listening, but I'm waving my arms because I can just see Keanu behind me fanning those flames, and it's just the sweetest. He is just so endearing, and it's just such a beautiful love story. I adore A Walk in the Clouds. I also, this is also one that people probably will be like, really? What? I adore him in Dracula.
My God.
It might be also be my Gary Oldman sort of
Yeah.
crush too, but I just think that those two, that movie is just spectacular in so many
The
ways. And
cast in
the
Dracula.
casting, that whole casting, the cast, the cast, the cinematography,
Yes.
the costumes, everything about that movie is fantastic. And I love him and Winona Ryder together as a pairing. So that movie is one of my faves with him. Speed, always a top movie for
Yep.
me. I mean, and if you read How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days, there are quite a few Speed references because I had to do it. I just think that Jack is just dreamy to me.
Well,
Jack as a character is such a dreamy, heroic character.
mhm. Mhm.
Just everything about him is just fantastic,
And I
just
didn't
like shoot the
realize
hostage. I'm just like,
shoot the hostage. I didn't realize
I
how
love it.
deep the love for Speed went in the world of romance as well. Like, I don't,
Oh,
the
it's
amount of
fantastic.
times I see people mentioning Speed specifically on Twitter is just like incredible to me because I love it, but it is one of the most ridiculous movies like ever made, like in a
It is such a
wonderful way.
ridiculous movie.
Wonderful.
It's
I say
just,
that with my
it's
heart.
really, I mean, how many hours does the movie last? 6 hours, it's, an hour and a half, but the day lasts what, 6 hours or so, but it's just such an emotional love story
Hmm.
I'm thinking of it, that spin out that they do, he and Sandra Bullock, that spin out
When they come
and
down
that
off the
come
bus.
down off of the bus and that spin out and that kiss, it is absolutely it's
Yeah, it's
one
great.
of the best moments on film. It is
It's so good.
glorious.
It is so good.
Now,
And if,
Speed 2 is an abomination to
oh
me,
no,
but
that's,
whatever. We won't discuss it. I don't know if I've ever gotten through the full
oh gosh,
Speed
I
2.
have, and I will save you the 2 hours of your
I mean, I
time.
probably did, and blocked it through. And every time it comes on, I watch some of Speed 2, and I'm like, really? Like, what are we doing?
But you're
But
right. It's one of those movies that you don't necessarily sit down to watch. It's like you just catch it when it's on
you catch
TV
it.
for
You
like
catch
20
it when it's
minutes.
on TV. There's so many good Keanu's. Also, Dangerous Liaisons. Dangerous Liaison. It's like, oh, there's so much. There's so much. You can
So
love Keanu
good.
from here to, then we get. Haven't even touched on The Matrix.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I know it's more recent, but I really loved when he was in Always Be My Maybe as himself.
Yeah.
Like,
You can just go and go and go.
so
Yeah,
good. Like,
so good.
criticize his acting as much as you want. However, he has played historical figures. He has
Mm-hmm.
played, the romance hero. He has played the
Mm-hmm.
action hero. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to give the guy props for having range, and then at the same
Serious
time
range.
he does it without being a problematic asshole. And I think that is the appeal of Keanu Reeves. Like, I think when people say, like, why Keanu, it's like, well, think about all of the people out there in Hollywood. Which one of them have you not heard at least one little tidbit about in a negative way, or like from an ex, or something about them
Something.
being a dick on set, or
Something.
like, even I always think of Tom Hanks as being like the sweetest guy of Hollywood, but even I've heard from like one person about like a negative experience they had
Mm-hmm.
with him. And I'm like, of course, it's difficult to be like a perfect human being all the time, but
No, no one is
Keanu,
a perfect human being. And I
no.
don't think that Keanu is a perfect human being. And I think that he would be the type to recognize that he's not a
Yes,
perfect
that's
human being.
exactly it.
People have asked me, like, when you've gotten this deep dive into Keanu, sort of, I know nothing about him, he knows nothing about me, or whatever. But I think he sort of has this thing with him. And the only way that I can describe it is he's sort of like, okay, I F up, like people F up every day. I F up every day. Like, I am definitely a person who F's up every day, but is probably grateful for the next chance. And he has this
Yeah.
feeling to me that he might be a person who messes up, but is always grateful for another chance
Very
and looks at
self-aware.
things like they're there, but for the grace of God go I, sort of like. So
Yeah.
he will help the next person or do something for the next person because it's sort of like, okay, we're all kind of the same. We're all kind of people anyway. So let me help you out because you know what? I might need help the next day. So, and this might not be true. I could just be projecting, but he has that way about him. And it just sort of feels that way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what comes off in his acting, why he can have such range to play characters from, here to there, because he's just got that way. I mean, I've heard stories, that aren't so perfect. I mean, we've heard stories that, allegedly about drugs or allegedly about sex or allegedly about this or, none of those make him, the perfect, in whoever's eyes, upstanding whatever person, depending on what you think or believe in. But he's just another human.
He's still a human, yeah.
He's still a human. And none of those change how I would feel about Keanu. I mean, people have come up to me and said things like, oh, I've seen him here and there and everywhere. And I'm like, doesn't that sound great? It's like, well, lucky you. Got to see Keanu.
You get to see him a lot. Isn't that nice? Yeah, no, I will say my one like more personal connection to him is that they filmed the Matrix movies, starting with the very first one in I don't know what part of the Matrix movies, but they filmed part of it in these abandoned like warehouses that are in my hometown. And so
cool.
He has spent a good amount of time in the thriving metropolis of Alameda, California. And that
is how I've heard of Alameda, California. Probably looking at different photos of him in my pandemic research, seeing Alameda, California. Exactly.
Probably it. It's an island. It's across from San Francisco in the, Bay. But no, so I haven't had any specific interactions with Keanu, but the amount of like stories that have circulated around our hometown about, oh, guess who came in and got an ice cream cone and sat down outside on the curb and ate it by himself. Keanu Reeves. So I think he's a human like anybody else, like not a deity.
He feels a little bit more human than most stars,
and that's attractive, I think, to people too, is like this idea of, wow, this is a movie star that's so hot, but also they're a real person. Because I think it's hard to separate that sometimes especially when the celebrity is so attractive, so physically attractive. I think that's hard.
So it is hard. It's very hard. And he must work at it. He must work. It seems like he must work at the ground, being grounded.
Yeah.
The fact that he would have the ice cream and sit outside by himself.
I love that.
It's got to take work. I mean, it's work. Being an introvert, as I am, as a lot of writers are, peopling is hard. So it must be work for him. It's got to be when people want so much of you, so much of your time. So that must be hard.
Yeah. I think it's also a different time right now where I think we're attracted to somebody of that quality who's not necessarily like out in the public and wanting to talk all the time and wants to spend some time to theirself, whether it's to eat an ice cream cone on the curb or whatever, that we weren't necessarily maybe as a whole attracted to 20 years ago. And I think that's why the Keanu today is super attractive to not just women, first of all, but also not just like women in like their 20s. Like I'm talking about people across the generations. Like my mom is super into Keanu. I'm super into Keanu. The girls that I've babysat are super into Keanu.
You are really hitting on it. And that's another reason I wanted to write this. After I sent out the tweet, I talked to my mother every day. But I spoke to my mother the next day and I mentioned to her the ideas. I don't always, but she says, I was just watching him on the Netflix last night. She always says the Netflix.
Yes.
She said, I was just watching him on the Netflix last night. She loves him even more than I do. So, and I said the same thing to my daughter. I mentioned her the idea. She goes, oh, I love him. He's hot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, Missy. Mentioned it to my friend, one of my best friends. She's like, love him. He really just spans generations. And I was somewhere giving a talk, and it was men and women there. There were couples there, and I spoke about my next work being How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. This man, part of the couple, and he goes, he's a real man's man. And he was a man in his, I want to say in his 40s or maybe in his 50s. He's a real man's man. He really just sort of just transcends. And it might be the fact that he really is just so much, he's a little bit removed. And like you said, how so many people want attention now, just regular folks with TikTok, social media. Everybody wants
Yeah.
this, like, eyes on me, eyes on me. And he's very much not like eyes on me, eyes on me. That could be it.
It's interesting.
Goodness knows I would have loved, I've tried to find his Instagram, Twitter handle or whatever. I put up a TikTok over the Keanus who follow me now, and there are plenty. I get so many messages from Keanu, say Keanu number 15467. Hi, dear. Thank you so much for your interest. I'm like, I'm not interested. Thank you.
I know that it's not you.
I've got, all of these Keanus following me. None of them are the one. I'm like, if only the real one could just,
But he wouldn't.
hold my
there.
book. He wouldn't. But if he could hold my book and be like, hi,
Yes.
I'd be a New York Times bestseller. It would be beautiful. But all of these fake Keanus, but everybody wanting a piece of him, it's amazing. But he's just not that. He's not that guy.
Not that guy. I think it's decided this is now a Keanu Reeves stan podcast. So,
it's definitely, it's I wish him all joy in that way. It's a very cool thing.
I agree.
It's a cool thing. I hope that he doesn't, I hope wherever he is, I hope he's not somewhere hating on the woman who wrote this book and is like, what a jerk she is, because I really, really hope not.
I don't think so. I think his response, first of all, I feel like there's enough people in the world who have probably either sent him a copy or brought his attention to it for him to know about it. And I think that if he were to read it, and even if he weren't, even if he were just to see his name in the title of this book, his response would be, I love that journey for her. What a great decision.
I hope so. I hope it's not like what a ding, or what a strange person, what a weirdo. I'm like, really? Because that would just make me feel bad.
No, I think it would be positive, and I don't even think he would make it about himself. I think he would celebrate the fact that you wrote a book, and that's enough.
Oh, she wrote a book. Please celebrate that it's Lou's journey, and it's helping people through grief. Let's helping people through a hard pandemic time, which is really what it's about. That's what I was looking for. Never found that tweet. Someone said, "What's your book about?" The cover copy will say the book is about a 40-something-year-old fangirl who sees a tweet that says Keanu's getting married in 90 days, and her life essentially stops, and she decides to go on a quest to stop his wedding, either to get him to marry her or at least not get married. And what it's really about is her journey through grief and healing and finding love that might be right beside her and her best friend. So
I love
that's
that.
what it's really about.
We just had that discussion. I teach online creative writing courses, and I just had that discussion with my new batch of students, is like, well, what's it about when we're talking about the plot? We're talking about what's it about versus the theme, the message. What's it really about? Like, what's the underlying message behind what we're seeing? And it always proves to be a really interesting discussion, because there are genuinely a lot of people who haven't really been asked to separate those two ideas before.
They're very hard to separate, I have to say, and it's taken me, what am I up to? This is book 12 or 13 to learn how to separate those things. And sometimes it's always there, but sometimes I don't know what it is until maybe even after the book is published.
Sure.
And I find I have a little post-it on my I'm the queen of the Post-its when it comes to plotting, when it comes to everything. But it's on my windowsill. I'm looking at it right now because it's still there, because it seems to be a running theme through a lot of my books, probably most of my books, maybe all of my books. And it was definitely through Keanu, because that's when I put it up there. And it says, love takes courage.
I mean, if you're going to choose a theme to like run through all of your books, I think that's one that can definitely do the job.
When I look back, I'm like, yes, you've written about that a lot, but really it does. And especially I found during this pandemic time that I was writing about that, but it really was helping me just personally in my life, as I was worried so much about family members, about,
Yeah.
my son and my daughter out there in the world still having to go to work, or my husband when he still would have to go, I'm working from home, but he would have to go out and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you're essential, so you still have to go to work. And I'm like, spraying them down with disinfectant and things and, saying a little prayer. It was very scary for
Yeah.
I'm not the only one going through this. The rest of the world was going through the same thing. And it's like, you're worried about the people you love and, having such anxiety. And this whole feeling of love taking courage
Mm-hmm.
was something that was really, really gripping me throughout this time, and still is right now, of course. So that's what I felt compelled to write about, and try to find a way to write it funny. Funny writing was not the easiest thing this
I'm
year.
sure.
This year, but I tried my best. Someone sent me a little something today, and it was an odd line, and I laughed and had no recollection of writing it, but I was so grateful to get it. The line was, I'm going to look at it. The line was, there are worse things to swallow than a bit of eel when there's money on the table. And there was a line from Keanu out of context, and she laughed. And I said, thank you for that. I have no recollection of writing it because I write things and forget it. But I'm like, oh, they were like, what's really funny? I was like, oh, I appreciate that.
That sounds like a new TikTok trend or something that you need to do, which is lines out of context that I have no recollection of writing. Let's make it happen.
Worse things to swallow than a bit of eel when there was one money on the table. I was like, what in the world was I thinking?
I'm not going to disagree with that.
I don't disagree with it. I will still stand by that line, but I'm like, when did I write it and what was I thinking? I have no clue.
Oh my God, I love it. Well, okay, we've talked about Keanu. We've talked about this book that, the healing process of dealing with grief and trauma while attaching ourselves to Keanu. And I mean, ourselves in the actual humans, not just Lou in this book. But if that...
Not as Lou.
Yeah, and if that premise alone and the hilarious title haven't already enticed people to pick up a copy of the book, I do also just want to mention the fact that Lou, our heroine, represents a demographic that is honestly vastly underrepresented in not just romance novels, but media in general, and that is women over 40, or more specifically, Black women over 40. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to say thank you. And I'm really in my feelings about Lou and Lou's demographic, especially she's younger than me, but I felt so strongly about Lou and her age and how I wrote her, making her a fangirl.
Yeah.
And I've gotten, I'll be candid with you, everything's not all rosy and roses. I've gotten some criticism over Lou's age, being that she is over 40 and she's chasing after Keanu, saying that she, may be too old to put everything down and go after this man, and that it might be that it's too far-fetched who would do such a thing. Well, it's fictional. I agree. It's absolutely far-fetched, but it's fictional. So that's what fictional characters do. They do things that are out of the norm from what regular people can do.
Yeah.
And that she's too old to have this fixation on a character. And I understand that it's kind of wild that she would have this fixation on a character, but there is a reason behind it once you read the book.
Yes.
And I think that reason is very valid for her, which we discussed, dealing with her overwhelming grief.
Yeah.
And people deal with grief differently. So that has been her reasoning. Like I said, the story is not really, it's not so much Keanu per se, but the trauma she had
Yeah.
which is why she has that fixation. So to me, it makes sense. It might not to others, and everybody to each his own. But I think that there is a space, some of the criticisms to me seem a little bit like policing women's joy.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, because
especially at a certain
I
age.
wonder, at a certain age, and that's what sort of gets me a little bit. And I know that writers sort of have to sort of walk a thin line and sort of like, it's all rosy and if it's not for you, I understand it's not for you. But I being the age I am now, which is over 50, which is sort of like, I'm like, when did that happen and how? Because there, in a lot of ways, I'm still trying to figure things out. Everything is not always settled at a certain age. And I think for women, especially for Black women, we're seen in media and in the world as in certain ways, like you or you've got to have it together, or when we're portrayed in media, we are sort of, if you're thinking a Black woman over 40 or over 50, usually on the screen it's as the best friend who's the psychologist, or the one who has it all together, the one in the office who seems to have it together, but not the one having fun or being sort of wild and zany or doing these kind of things. And the fact that I've written a character who is kind of wild and zany and going after, doing this sort of quest, she is a little bit different in that way. And I think that's sort of hitting people in a different way. And the criticism she's getting is she doesn't sound like a 40-year-old, or
What does that mean?
And I'm saying, what does that mean? To me, how does that not, I'm thinking if she wasn't who she is, which is a Black woman at 40, if she was anything else, maybe she wouldn't get the same criticisms. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I am completely wrong.
I don't think you are either.
Myself am a 50-year-old woman still trying to figure it all out, but I'm also a fan of K-pop, things like that. I put up a TikTok to show that I, have my light sticks from BTS. I enjoy these things because these are the things that give me joy. I haven't given them up. But I'm also a Black woman who's a writer, who has raised 2 kids, who has been married for 30 years. Women are women in all different ways and different facets of our lives. But just because the world puts certain perceived restrictions on them, how can we change those things that we're all seen to do different things? If, men to me don't have these sort of restrictions. It's sort of like, they can sort of be childlike for longer. Why can't women be childlike for longer?
Oh boy. And has that been a hot topic even specifically on TikTok recently, is sort of people reacting to these videos of married couples where, the wife pokes fun at the husband for, haha, look, my husband put our child's shirt on backwards today. He's so funny. And then people's responses being like, I don't understand why we're joking about that. Why is this supposed to be funny? Like, why we're letting people, specifically men, get away with and slide with this like childlike behavior. But if a woman wants to have fun, doesn't want to get married, wants to party until 1 a.m. when she's 45, why is that wrong?
Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Yeah. Suddenly you've got, the women have to be the caregivers of everyone. Yes. It's always, women are sort of put in this thing. It's like, oh, I've got an extra child where I'm taking care of my husband too. It's like, wait a minute, what is going on here, and how long does this have to go on?
Yeah,
and I've even had the criticism, one person saying that her friends should have had her, I'm talking about my character now, her friends should have had her committed. And that I'm worried about her ovaries. Why are you worried about my character's ovaries? And the fact that that she's childless or have chosen to be childless.
First of all, I just want to put this out there because
why are we getting into this?
So many things that I could say about this. But first of all, I don't think any individual should ever worry about another individual's ovaries, just as like
and a fictional character, no less,
statement.
A fictional character's ovaries. It's like my head almost exploded. I'm like, what? How much are you putting on this poor character who, you know, is sort of real to me because I made her up in my head, but this is like, we're really getting into policing women heavy when we're getting into policing fictional women and what they do with their bodies in this way.
Yeah.
It's
a lot.
It's really a lot of it, but it's like, it has made me think so hard. And, you know, I say to my daughter a lot, because my kids are in their 20s, and you know, I worry about them a lot, and still I said, like what I say to my daughter, I said, the older I get, the more I forgive grandma, my own mom, because I expected her to have so much together.
Okay.
But now I realize she's only done the best. She's only been doing the best she can. Just like I hope that as you get older, you'll forgive me, because I'm still only doing the best I can.
Things are
the
changing.
Advice I give you is just the best. I don't have it all together.
Yeah, no,
you know?
there's so many things to talk about here that we are not going to have enough time to talk about.
No, I'm sorry. Now I'm getting sort of deep into like women and feminism and things like that.
But is romance. This is what I love to talk about in romance, is going beyond the books themselves and just sort of like, well, how do the books we read and the media we consume tie into the world today, and vice versa, because we are seeing ourselves and what our world looks like reflected in the media we consume, and then vice versa, it's being given back to us. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from 2021 from reading was sort of checking myself on like why certain things didn't work for me. And I think this is a great thing for every reader to think about, whether you're a newbie romance reader or you've been reading romance for 20 years. Totally up to you. But the world is changing. We are changing, ideally, with the world. Like, that's not to say that we're changing at the same speed that the world is changing, and that's okay. But
and a lot of people are trying very hard to hold on to it and hold it back.
I think we all have certain things that we cling to, for whether it's like a safety thing or a familiarity. Or a power thing. Yeah. I mean,
that's where it gets dangerous.
There's good things to cling to and there's not so good things to cling to. But I think whatever it is, when you do read something and you have a negative reaction to it, you know, if you're reading How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days and saying, I don't understand why this 40-something-year-old woman is obsessed with this guy. Like, what is wrong with her? She needs to be committed. Step back. Think about what is making you have those feelings. What is it in your own life and what you've been taught and what you read and what you're told that is making you have this reaction? Like, and honestly, even when you do that, if it's still not a good reaction for you, that's okay. You don't have to love.
Sure. Everything is not for everybody.
Exactly. But I think the important thing is just to kind of think about, where is this thought process coming from? Like, is this my own thought that I'm having, or is this something that maybe I didn't even realize has been instilled in me for such a long time that it's just become part of my go-to thought process about certain ways of being? And it's something that I think everybody needs to consider when they're reading something, when they're watching something. And I think some people are resistant to that idea because, oh, it's just a book. It's just a movie. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Maybe the book or the movie itself doesn't matter in the long run, but your reaction to it does. So I think it's important for people to think about why they're reacting certain ways to certain things that they consume.
It's very true. That's very true. It's sort of like, you know, why is it resonating so harshly with you?
Sure.
Why are you stopping yourself so much from enjoying this? And what else are you stopping from enjoying? Or is the world stopping you from enjoying? If there's so much that they say women can't do past a certain age, then where would the entertainment business be?
Yeah.
I mean, the money-making consumers are older.
And where do you draw the line? Like, where is the line drawn? Because I do wonder, what if Lou was 32? What if Lou was
Mm-hmm.
25? Would that make a
Mm-hmm.
difference in the way that people digest her character?
Yes. I wonder, what if Lou was not black?
Yeah.
What if Lou was not black? Then what age would be acceptable? But what if Lou was 25? Then how would it be acceptable since Keanu is 50? What?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, how then I don't think the dynamic would
Which
work
is
as
why
well.
the 40-something made perfect sense to me,
That's
because I was
that's
like,
why the 40-something made sense to me also. She needed to be 40-something because she needed to have that age range
Right.
because of Keanu's actual age.
yeah, no, I am with you 100% on that. And so
She couldn't be younger because Keanu is older.
no, and you know
And
what?
he's a real person.
He wouldn't have reacted well to that.
After the news of his real relationship came out, which we know about,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's with someone close to his age, and we're
yeah.
all like, yay to that. A 20-something-year-old or even 30, it wouldn't work. Like the timeline
No.
wouldn't work out. So I'm like, so what is acceptable and what is not acceptable?
Yeah. It's a weird line that's been drawn.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of, there was this I'm not the biggest fan of Amy Schumer. I think she does a lot of problematic content. However, I will say she had this wonderful sketch back in the day called
Mm-hmm.
Your Last Fuckable Day. And it was a sketch she did with, I think, Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Tina Fey and maybe somebody else. But the whole concept was like, you reach a certain point where you stop being able to play the like young, gorgeous
Sure.
love interest main character. And then you have 20 years until you can play the mom. Like, and those are
Absolutely.
the two character types that you get to play. And unfortunately,
That's it.
talk
That
about
is absolutely it.
talk about reflecting our media within our lives. I think that these are kind of the two central roles we've sort of cast women into in real life.
It drives me absolutely banana cakes
Yeah.
when there are so many women in between
Mm-hmm.
those ages, in between those ranges and ages,
Yep.
who are so gorgeous, not just gorgeous, but smart and dynamic and just intriguing and attractive
And happy.
and happy and just happy in their lives, living their lives and happy that you want to engage in them just when you
Right.
see them, as celebrities that I would follow, and I'm like, oh, I would love to, when I come up with characters as a
Yeah.
writer, I see this person as that person and this person as that person, as people I would cast in my books and characters I would think of, and they're all would be in their later 30s and 40s and whatever, and I would definitely consider them all in funny situations and definitely in sexual situations and things
Yeah.
like that, and how much I would love to see all of this on screen. It really drives me bananas.
It's an interesting time. I do think we are seeing some changes being made. I think sometimes we're changing ahead of the world. I think sometimes the world is changing ahead of us. I think the world of romance is far ahead of where the world of Hollywood is.
Far ahead in certain ways.
I think we could be further.
It could be further.
But...
and this is it could be further for Black writers. Not far enough. Nearly not far enough. I think YA is much further ahead,
which is interesting.
Definitely much further ahead. But I also think there is a spot. There's this sort of strange gray area where when it comes to the BIPOC experience and entertainment, I think, which sort of gets into YA and gets into younger characters and things like that. Entertainment seems to be more open to, unfortunately, trauma.
Yeah.
Than to when they're dealing with people of color, than they are open to joy and things like that, as if there's only one experience for diverse people.
You wrote a book that filled that gap. I mean, you wrote a book that is very much about a Black woman seeking joy beyond her 40s.
And that's, and for some people that's a different thing to see. And I'm not the only one doing it. There's plenty of writers who do it. There's so many who do it. And I think it's different for people to read and see. So there might be some pushback against it.
Sure.
There's lots of rom-coms by Black authors, out now and coming out, which is fantastic to see. But, I'd love to see them picked up in bigger ways. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, and maybe the more, and I completely agree with you that I feel like as far as romance has come, even in the last few years, there's still a lot of work to do, especially within the space of BIPOC oh my God, words. BIPOC authors.
It's a long day.
And LGBTQ authors and any sort of marginalized author.
Any sort of marginalized authors. It seems to be easier to not get the joy stories out there.
Yeah, I'd like to see that change. I would like to see that change, honestly, just because I like to read about happy love stories. And anybody can have those.
Romance readers in general like that. Romance readers, that's the genre. The genre definition says happily ever after.
There you go.
That's what they told us, and that's what it says, and that's what we write.
I don't care how much angst y'all like. If y'all are angsty readers, there's still a happily ever after at the end.
There's still a happily ever after, and there's so many great writers, doing it. All of us writers doing it came up being fans of the genre, reading it. So, we know what we're doing. We know how to do it. But we shall see. But I think to a lot of people, when they see it, they're sort of like,
this is new. This is different.
But it's not really.
It's different.
But it's not new. It's really not. The characters have different hues, but it's not new. It's not different. And we might, and the language is not new. And different. None of it is different. I mean, we might have different. Sure, our voices might have different. We might say something different about the world.
Sure.
I will say. I mean, if you read my books, you're going to get some of my views on the world. That's hey. Too bad, too sad.
But you're going to get that from any author. That's
you're going to get that from any author. You're going to get a little bit, some of their views are going to come out. You're going to get that from any author if they're writing true. There
you go. There it is right there. Well, I could go on and talk to you for many more hours to come. No, I love this. It's interesting. This is
so much fun. I'm sort of for you. The fact that the full disclosure, I'm just getting over COVID. I haven't been talking to many people at all, and poor Kelly. I'm like, thank you for talking to me, Kelly. I'm so happy to talk to another human today.
Oh my God. Let me tell you all the things I've been thinking
about. Let me
about.
tell you all the things I've been thinking about for the past couple of weeks, and I've only had my poor husband to talk to you. Thank you, Kelly.
I will take all of it. No, I could go on. We could go on
You're
and
on. And I so appreciate this today.
I appreciate you. I appreciate this book. I always love hearing from authors, especially ones who talk about how they're not necessarily maybe seeing the story they want to see, or they're seeing the characters that they want to see represented.
They are out there. They're out there. I'm seeing them. I just want to see more. They're out there. Like, we have got, Farrah Rashan and Zio Axelrod. We've got, so many great stories out there. Ceresia Glass, I just used her. So there's a lot of authors. There's tons of great, authors out there doing it.
I just interviewed Ceresia last month.
Isn't her book is fantastic, isn't it?
So fun. Talk about another great, joyful story. And if people haven't listened to our interview with Ceresia, it came out in January. So go check it out. But
love that book. So I mean, the stories are definitely fun and out there. I'm just saying,
more.
Let's have more, and I want to see them, on screen, and I want to see it everywhere. I'm going to keep pushing. This is my little soapbox, and I'm going to keep standing on it.
Take it
until people are just be like, okay, enough of it. We've got too many, and there'll never be enough. So there you go.
Listen, I went to school for screenwriting. I have been reading romance for over a decade. Somebody give me their credit card, and I will make the damn movies.
Do you hear that, Netflix?
Oh, someday. But I would love to end on what's coming up next for you. What's in store for 2022?
I'm like, what's next? What's today's date? I don't know. I never know the day of the week. I've got pandemic brain. What month are we in?
Mm-hmm.
In July, I actually do have a book coming out this year. I can't forget that. I've got to start promoting it, don't I? July, I have it feels like long awaited in a way, my long awaited sequel to Real Men Knit
Yes.
under my other name, which is Kwana Jackson. It's not so far removed, we've been saying Kwana. It's called Not Again. It's the second installment in my Real Men Knit series, and it's my firefighter Lucas's story. And I'm so excited for people to read it. I just did my cover reveal last month, and it's such a glorious cover. And I'm super excited. So
I'm excited to read
it
it
already.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. It's not yet up on like NetGalley and things like that, but it should be soon. It's
Yes. Yes.
it should be soon. So yeah, Lucas's story is just. I had so much fun writing it. I had fun writing it, but it's also very heartfelt and it's just beautiful, and I'm really excited.
Does love take courage in this book too?
It does. I hate the huge spoiler. Love does take courage in that book. Love, it does take courage.
I think you just need to do some branding, like on your website. That's just like
I need
writes
to do
books
that, right?
about love taking courage.
There you go. Writes books.
Courageous love.
About love. Courageous. Thank you. Would you please work for me in PR?
Oh, girl, here I am.
Do need help. I do need help with that. But yeah, so that's what's coming. That's coming July, and I'm super excited about that coming from Berkeley. So.
Awesome.
Yay! It's the other me.
Yeah, the other me. Yes, I know everybody listening won't understand because we had a whole conversation before we even started recording about being a Gemini and having two of you, but
I am very much a Gemini. I am a Gemini with two pen names, and I had twins, so there you have it.
Oh my God.
A mother of twins
That's
who's a Gemini
amazing.
with two pen names. How'd that happen?
That it was meant to be. I mean, honestly, it was in the stars. Like, there you go.
It totally was in the stars.
Wow. Well, my last question for you is something that I'm always curious about, and put on your non-pandemic brain to like really dive in, or not, whatever. But
okay, sounds good.
Is there a story that you're dying to tell? Something that like lurks around your brain, keeps you up at night? The dream project?
Oh, I always have those. I have one dream project that I am dying to finish. And one day I will. That darn thing has been in my brain, I want to say about 8 years. I should finish it. That's how long. It's like probably halfway done. And so one day I will finish that. There's a new story I am dying to tell that I just came up with the other day.
Okay.
Like yesterday, 2 days ago. So it feels very exciting and fresh and new.
Yeah.
So I should play with that a little bit. Like super exciting. It's the secret though. Like it was sort of like a big whammer.
Get me
hit
excited.
Me in the head. Like such a huge secret whammer, and it was like, quick, start typing something right this very
Pull
minute.
Out your Post-its.
That doesn't happen very often, but it was one of those like kind of thing. And so yes.
Okay. Well, that told me a whole lot of nothing except you're excited, which I guess is fine. I can settle for you being excited about it.
I can't divulge anything else. I'm one of those people too. If I say too much about something, I won't like it anymore. So
okay. I actually understand that. So yeah, that's fine. We'll stop. We'll just stop there and just let you be excited, and hopefully we'll one day get to enjoy the fruits of your excitement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, but thank you so much for hanging out with me. And I know that this is, for our listeners, this is a little bit, I feel like a little different than my usual interviews. Usually we talk a lot more about like your experience writing and like your background as a writer, which it's absolutely okay we didn't get to, because I think everything we talked about is worth talking about. So
thank you. I hope I didn't steer you into a whole different dimension.
I loved it. I think it was great.
I enjoyed this conversation so much.
Me too.
This has been a total pleasure. I hope people will pick up How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. I feel like what we talked about was maybe a little deeper than the book, or maybe not. If you read the book, you're probably going to get, I hope you, whoever, if you pick up the book, I hope you get the whole love takes courage thing. I hope you laugh a lot. Really,
Yeah.
there are quite a few laughs in the book. I will describe it that way. There are a lot of laughs in the book. There are some poignant moments and some surprising celebrity cameos. I did give one away with Lisa and Jason. That's fine, but there are
It's
some
just a little
other surprising
preview.
celebrity cameos, which I think are a lot of fun. And I love these characters, so I hope you love them too.
Perfect. Yeah. And
How's that?
I know I did. So I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who will as well. So yeah, grab the book.
Thank
It's
you.
available now, and look out for the next book in the Real Men Knit series coming this summer. But thank you again for hanging out with me, and I hope you feel better and the whole household feels better soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Everyone, please do your best to stay healthy. Well, let's just all do our part.
Yes, ma'am. 2022, here we go.
Oh, here we go. Another year.
Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.